In the distant future, men are forced to live in a spacecraft, hoping to revive the forsaken and uninhabitable Earth. However, a fateful mission is ordered to destroy the space-preserved forests, so a devoted botanist stands between the annihilation of Earth's remaining environment. As another century begins inside the space fleet of American Airlines space freighters, resident botanist Freeman Lowell maintains all flora and fauna inside the 6 biological domes, mounted on their aircraft called Valley Forge. Shortly after, co-scientist John Keenan speeds up to Lowell in his cart and tramples on the well-maintained grass. Annoyed by his carelessness, the botanist pushes his friend's vehicle off his sacred land. Despite his efforts, 2 other rowdy crewmen drive over Lowell's flowers, so the furious scientist throws a rake at them. Inside their ship, the 3 astronauts, John Keenan, Marty Barker, and Andy Wolf, park their carts after messing with their tedious crewmate. They continue their fun in the recreation room while teasing Lowell behind his back. Then, the botanist passes by with fresh harvest from his garden and refuses to play around with his friends. Lowell sets the food in the kitchen as he opens the window in front, gazing outside the vast darkness of the galaxy. Soon, the Valley Forge's 4 crewmen spend some time playing poker while they await a transmission from their superiors in the main station, Con Central. Lowell confidently assumes they will re-establish the park and forest system amidst this persistent request to the authorities. Spiteful, Marty questions the botanist, who aspires to be the system's director after dedicating 8 years to his environmental preservation project. On the other hand, Wolf thinks the transmission will only deliver another cutback, but Lowell believes otherwise. Marty cuts off his crewmates' fervent dreams, but the hopeful botanist reiterates the vital importance of forests and his vision of their natural prime on Earth. Since a century has already passed, the crewmen discourage Lowell, who surrenders onboarding his friends to his mission to foster Earth's biome. Soon after, Con Central transmits an announcement for all spacecrafts. To Lowell's bewilderment, all crewmen are ordered to abandon and destroy all forest dome units, then return the ships to commercial service due to undisclosed reasons. Contrarily, Marty and Wolf erupt in cheers, learning they can go home after years of the voyage. On the other hand, John acknowledges the botanist's despair but goes to prepare for their mission, which will commence the following day. That night, Lowell solemnly visits the ecological domes he has taken care of for a long time. The following day, Wolf denigrates the botanist's freshly cut melon since it smells, unlike their typical synthetic space food. Emotional from the Central's mission, Lowell defends nature's bounty, which he personally grew and harvested. But his crewmates continue teasing him, making the passionate man burst in anger. Nonetheless, the 3 astronauts remain disinterested in Lowell's frustration. Then, John reiterates that diseases, poverty, and unemployment, which were ailing problems of the habitable Earth, are currently no longer a problem. Inevitably, his visionary friend argues that the loss of beauty and imagination stems from their indifference. Despite Lowell's efforts to reason with his friends, the unconcerned crew head to the domes to execute the Central's commands. While navigating the high forest, Marty trips and scratches himself, so he returns and asks Lowell to nurse him in the cabin. Suddenly, the freighter, Berkshire's captain, Neil, orders Valley Forge to maneuver the ship. Hesitantly, the downcast botanist assists the injured man at the command station. Meanwhile, Wolf and John locate the greenhouse's main tube and set the detonator inside. Afterward, they hear explosions from nearby freighters who have begun exploding their respective domes, while the Valley Forge's forest inhabitants scurry in fright. Shortly after, John jettisons the greenhouse domes one by one into the endless space. At the same time, Lowell watches from one of the biomes in despair, while salvaging some of his plants into flower pots. Then, the abandoned domes explode consecutively, triggering and infuriating the impassioned preservationist. After the 4th dome explodes, John enters Lowell's favorite unit to plant the nuclear bomb. However, the botanist stands in his way and threatens him. Annoyed by the stubborn man, John hits Lowell's leg and disables him as a fight ensues. Eventually, Lowell pins his friend down and blocks his airway with a shovel, killing him instantly. With a severely injured leg, the determined botanist jettisons the remaining dome and detonates the bomb while Wolf and Marty are still inside, caught in the explosion. At the command station, while Neil from the freighter Berkshire contacts Valley Forge, Lowell struggles to stop his bleeding leg with a microphone wire. To avoid suspicion, the botanist promptly claims they're experiencing a technical problem and will update their situation soon. Afterward, the remaining crewman commands the 3 service robot drones to gather at the main cargo area. Then, Lowell radios Neil, informing him of their unsolved problem, which delays the fleet's flight home. Moments later, Lowell stakes a fake premature detonation on Dome Number 2, claiming his shipmates are inside it, pronouncing them dead. Determined to flee with the remaining forest unit, Lowell accelerates the freighter on a risky course toward planet Saturn. Feigning hopelessness, Lowell asks for immediate assistance on the radio from his superior, Commander Anderson, who informs him about Valley Forge's grave situation. They notice the discarded cargo modules of the ship, which the drones released under Lowell's orders. The superior instructs the survivor about his remaining possible course of action, to which Lowell smiles, confirming they've fallen for his scheme. Exhausted by his wound, the botanist falls to the ground and calls drone number 1 for help. Then, Lowell studies the robot's manual and alters the program so they can perform medical chores. Soon, the severely injured botanist inserts the drone's replenish reprogram disks into the robot's port and disseminates their specialized task for surgical operation. After a successful surgery, Lowell delivers a false update to Anderson. Wary of the reported situation, the commander cautiously reminds the crewman about the risks of his job, suggesting to end his life before the ship explodes when it hits Saturn's rings. However, Lowell assures him that he's alright, so Anderson praises his bravery as he ends the line, and communication cuts off. Afterward, Lowell rests in his room while Valley Forge collides with Saturn's rings as predicted. Meanwhile, the three robots slowly retreat inside the ship when drone number 3 lags behind. Eventually, the third robot gets caught in the intense force field and loses into the darkness. Fortunately, the freighter unexpectedly withstands the rough passage, saving the biodome and the Valley Forge. Soon after, the botanist remembers John's dead body, which was forgotten in the dome, so he orders the drones to bury the man while he watches through the robot's camera. Tear-stricken, Lowell apologizes for the horrible things he did and properly bids farewell to the crewman who died at the expense of his beloved forest. Later, the lone survivor faces service drone number 1 and 2, naming them Dewey and Huey respectively. He also calls the lost drone number 3 as Louie, who did not survive the planet Saturn. Amused by his new friends, Lowell reminds them that they will spend more time maintaining the forest while attending to their usual ship duties. At the greenhouse, the botanist teaches Dewey and Huey to plant their first tree. Despite the robot's advanced skills, the drones fail to execute Lowell's commands properly. Nevertheless, the three of them have time on their hands to accomplish the preservation of the galaxy's remaining ecosystem. Soon, Dewey and Huey stand beside Louie's torn leg outside the spacecraft. Lowell retrieves it and reminds them to be cautious before resuming their duties. Much later, the botanist sets the telescope on the dome to view the image of his now barren home. While fooling around on a cart, he accidentally hits a cargo, spilling soil all over. Then, Lowell looks around, troubled by the quietness of Valley Forge. Tired and lonesome, Lowell solemnly reminisces the laughter he shared with his former crewmates, whom he lived with for the past years. However, he reminds himself that he is the reason for their deaths, together with the deep void he currently feels. At the command station, Lowell stares at the frequency waves and decides to reprogram the service drones so that they can play with him. Then he commands Dewey and Huey to report to the recreation room, where he installs the service drone's new discs. Afterward, Lowell plays poker with his synthetic friends just like what he does to have fun with the former Valley Forge crew. At first, Huey fails to form an independent and wise decision to play the tactician's game. However, in round 2, the robot wins and beats Lowell, which delights the lonely crew member. In the kitchen, Lowell grimaces at the tray of synthetic foods and discards them in the bin. Craving real food, he heads to the forest dome while the two service robots follow behind him. Arriving at the greenhouse, the horrified botanist finds the ecosystem all dried up. Lowell examines a damaged leaf under the microscope but fails to see and understand the cause of the problem. Consulting a biology book, Lowell sees pictures of the barren earth with dead forest, reminding him of the unsolved situation in his motherland. Distressed, Lowell jogs to the command station, imagining himself running through the dense natural forest that he longs for. Then he orders Huey to take a sample on barren soil and follows it into the dome. Speeding on the way to the unit, Lowell accidentally collides with his cart against Huey, which fails to follow his orders to remain in the forest. Soon after, Lowell cautiously treats the service drone's damaged parts, while Dewey sentimentally remains at his friend's side. Unfortunately, Huey can only faintly move its arms, given that Lowell did everything he could to repair the robot's broken parts. While Huey takes its rest, the hopeless botanist expresses his worries about the dying forest, as he is clueless about how to preserve it. Later on, Lowell awakens by the sound of Berkshire's transmission to Valley Forge. Somehow, the fleet regains contact with the lost freighter and sets to locate it on a rescue mission. Distraught by the unexpected situation, Lowell learns that Berkshire will be able to reach his location in 6 hours. Then, Anderson orders the botanist to jettison the remaining dome but not blow it up due to the dangers of navigating through the vast darkness. Suddenly, a realization hits Lowell, understanding that the dying ecosystem needs sunlight to nurse it back to health. So he races to the greenhouse with Dewey and Huey in order to remedy the dire situation. With limited time, the determined preservationist hastily installs a series of lamplights across the forest, successfully illuminating the biome. Afterward, Lowell sits in front of the service drones, telling Dewey to maintain the forest with all the knowledge he imparted during the days they spent together. Feeling sad, Lowell bids his farewell to the sole functioning drone as he entrusts him with the fate of the galaxy's remaining nature. Then, the downcast botanist walks away with Huey while Berkshire updates its rescue course. Finally, he jettisons the last forest dome away from the Valley Forge to save it from the mercy of human greed. Soon after, Lowell prepares a nuclear bomb as he shares a fateful memory with Huey. When he was a kid, the The botanist threw a message in a bottle into the ocean with his name and address on it. However, he never knew if someone had found it. Then, Lowell detonates the explosive device while his drone friend watches. Shortly after, Valley Forge blasts away in the expanse of the dark universe, along with the memories of the brave crewmen and the visionary ecologist. Meanwhile, Dewey tends to their last mission alone, to preserve the remaining trace of Earth's natural environment in the middle of nothingness.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.